The Krell war fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of an ordinary-looking star system. 12 enormous battle cruisers appeared in tight formation, each one the size of a small city. Their dark hulls reflected the distant sunlight as weapon systems hummed to life, charging for what they assumed would be an easy conquest. On the bridge of the flagship, Commander Wrath watched the view screen with growing anticipation. His scaled skin rippled with satisfaction as he studied the tactical display. The intelligence reports had been very clear about the system. A young human colony world orbited the third planet. Isolated, primitive technology, minimal defenses, perfect prey for the expanding Krell Empire. Wrath had conquered 17 worlds in his career. This would be number 18, and probably the easiest one yet. Humans were a species of Krell had heard about but never bothered with. They'd isolated themselves 2 centuries ago after some incident with the larger galactic community. No allies, no trading partners. No one would even notice when they disappeared. A beeping sound interrupted his thoughts. His sensor officer, a younger Krell with nervous eyes, looked up from his console. War Commander, we're picking up a transmission. It appears to be automated. Wrath waved a clawed hand dismissively. Put it through. The message crackled across every speaker on the bridge. A calm, emotionless voice spoke in perfect Krell language. You have entered human-controlled space without authorization. Turn back immediately. This is your only warning. Trespassers will be eliminated. For a moment, silence filled the bridge. Then someone started laughing. A deep, rumbling sound like stones grinding together. Another crew member joined in. Soon the entire bridge crew was laughing, their mandibles clicking in amusement. Eliminated. Wratha's second-in-command wheezed between laughs. They're going to eliminate us? With what? Their old mining ships. Wrath allowed himself a thin smile. These humans clearly had no idea who they were dealing with. The Krell Empire had crushed species far more advanced than these isolated primitives. The warning was almost insulting in its audacity. Ignore it completely, Wrath commanded, his voice cutting through the laughter. Navigation. Plot a direct course to the third planet. Weapons. Prepare bombardment patterns. Communications. Ready the standard surrender demand. Let's finish this quickly and move on to more worthy targets. The crew returned to their stations, still chuckling about the pathetic human warning. The massive fleet began moving deeper into the system, their powerful engines pushing them toward the inhabited world. Scanner readings showed a few orbital stations around the planets, some asteroid mining operations, standard civilian infrastructure. Nothing that looked even remotely military. What Commander Wrath and his entire fleet didn't know was that humanity had spent the last 200 years doing one thing very, very well. They had prepared. While the rest of the galaxy played politics and engaged in their carefully balanced power struggles, humanity had turned their entire star system into something the galaxy had never seen before. Not a home, not a colony, a weapon. The first sign of trouble came exactly 4 minutes after they'd ignored the warning. Wratha's sensor officer suddenly sat up straight, his eyes widening in confusion. War Commander, I'm detecting power signatures. Multiple sources. They're activating all around us. What sources? Wrath demanded, leaning forward in his command throne. Be specific. I don't know, sir. They weren't there a moment ago. Now they're everywhere. In the asteroid belt, in high planetary orbit, even in deep space. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. They're powering up weapon systems. The confident atmosphere on the bridge evaporated like morning mist. Officers stared at their displays in growing horror as more and more contacts appeared. They hadn't been hidden by any technology the Krell understood. They'd been completely dormant, indistinguishable from space debris and natural objects until the exact moment they decided to wake up. Wratha's tactical display lit up like a festival celebration. Red warning indicators surrounded his fleet on all sides. Above, below port, starboard. They were completely boxed in by weapons platforms that had appeared out of nowhere. Shields to maximum. All ships defensive formation. Wrath shouted, his earlier confidence crumbling. Identify those platforms. What are we dealing with? His weapons officer was frantically working his console, pulling up what data he could gather. Commander, they're reading as autonomous weapon platforms. Design unknown. They're not using any power signature we recognize. Each one is armed with what appears to be mass accelerator weapons. Lots of them. Mass accelerators. Railguns. Primitive kinetic weapons that the Krell had abandoned centuries ago in favor of energy-based systems. Wrath felt a moment of relief. Kinetic weapons were slow, easy to dodge, easy to shoot down with point defense. That relief lasted exactly 3 seconds. The lead Krell cruiser, the Vengeance of Krell, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, shields glowing, weapons charging. The next moment there was nothing but an expanding cloud of superheated debris and a blinding flash of light. No warning, no chance to evade. Just instant, total destruction. What happened? Wrath roared, gripping his armrest so hard his claws scraped metal. Kinetic strike! The tactical officer screamed. They fired solid projectiles at 0.3% light speed. The Vengeance shields didn't even slow them down. The impact energy was equivalent to... The second cruiser exploded, then the third. The railgun rounds were invisible until impact. Traveling so fast that sensors couldn't track them, computers couldn't calculate intercepts, and shields designed to stop energy weapons might as well have been tissue paper. Wrath watched in frozen horror as his unstoppable war fleet was torn apart like prey animals under a predator's claws. Each impact released enough kinetic energy to vaporize everything within a 100-meter radius. Armor plating that could withstand plasma cannons like foil. Structural supports designed to last centuries shattered into fragments. The humans hadn't just built defenses. They'd turned physics itself into a weapon. Evasive maneuvers returned fire. Do something. Wratha's voice cracked with panic as another ship on his display winked out of existence. But there was nothing to shoot at. The platforms were scattered across millions of kilometers, each one a tiny target compared to the massive Krell cruisers. And they were firing with computer-guided precision that no organic crew could match. Within 90 seconds of entering human space, half of Wratha's fleet was gone. The survivors tried desperately to retreat, to turn around, to flee back to the safety of deep space. That's when the human warships appeared, and Wrath realized a nightmare had only just begun. Captain Thomas Blake sat perfectly still in a command chair aboard the UNS Retribution, watching the tactical display as the automated defense platforms did their work. His bridge was quiet except for the soft beeping of consoles and the occasional status report. The crew around him moved with practiced efficiency, their faces showing no emotion despite what they were witnessing. This wasn't their first time watching a hostile fleet get torn apart. It wouldn't be their last. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez looked up from her tactical station, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Sir, Platform Network report 11 confirmed kills. Enemy formation is breaking apart. 6 ships remaining, all showing heavy damage and attempting to retreat. Thomas nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the display. The 6 surviving Krell cruisers were trying to turn around, their massive engines burning at maximum power as they desperately clawed their way back toward the edge of the system. It was almost sad to watch. Almost. All right, Thomas said, his voice calm and measured. Send the signal. Deploy hunter packs. Let's finish this. His communications officer pressed a single button. Across the vast emptiness of space, 50 human warships received the order simultaneously, and reality seemed to ripple as they appeared. They hadn't jumped in from hyperspace. They hadn't been hiding behind planets or asteroids. They'd been right there the entire time, floating in the void, their cloaking systems rendering them completely invisible to every sensor the Krell possessed. Some had been waiting for hours, others for days, all of them perfectly silent, perfectly still, like sharks suspended in dark water. Now they came alive. The human warships were nothing like the elegant vessels other species built. There were no smooth curves or artistic flourishes, no decorative elements or cultural symbols etched into the hulls. Every single centimeter was designed with one purpose in mind: to kill as efficiently as possible. They were smaller than the Krell cruisers, about a third of the size, but that just made them faster and harder to hit. Their hulls were angular and sharp, covered in layers of composite armor that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. Weapons pods bristled from every surface. missile tubes, railgun batteries, laser point defense systems. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a city. But the most terrifying thing about them wasn't their weapons. It was how they moved. The human fleet didn't lumber through space like the massive Krell cruisers. They moved like living things, like predators. Their formation shifted and flowed with liquid grace, responding to threats and opportunities faster than any organic crew should be able to manage, because most of the flying wasn't being done by humans at all. Advanced combat AIs handled the millisecond-to-millisecond adjustments, the tiny thruster burns, the constant microcorrections that let them dance through space with impossible precision. The human crews just pointed them at targets and pulled the trigger. All ships are in position, Captain, Rodriguez reported. We have firing solutions on all 6 remaining targets. Awaiting your order. Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying the display one more time. The Krell ships were scattered now, their tight military formation completely shattered. Some were venting atmosphere from hull breaches. Others had lost engine power and were drifting. One was spinning slowly, clearly out of control. They were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. All ships weapons free, Thomas said quietly. Standard engagement protocol. No survivors, no prisoners, no exceptions. The response was immediate and brutal. 50 human warships opened fire at once. Missiles streaked through the void by the thousands, their tiny engines burning bright against the darkness. Rail guns spat out solid slugs of tungsten, accelerated to impossible speeds. Laser batteries carved burning lines across the black. The Krell tried to fight back. Tried being the important word. Their plasma cannons swiveled and fired, sending glowing bolts of superheated matter toward the human ships. It was a wasted effort. By the time the plasma reached where a human ship had been, that ship was somewhere else entirely. The AI-assisted maneuvering systems predicted the shots before they were even fired, calculated the optimal evasion pattern, and had the ship moving before the Krell gunners even pulled their triggers. Meanwhile, the human missiles found their targets with surgical precision. They didn't just hit the Krell ships. They hit specific points on the Krell ships: engine compartments, weapon batteries, life support systems, command bridges. Each missile carried targeting data updated in real time by the ships that launched them, adjusting course right up until the moment of impact. One Krell cruiser tried to run. Its engines burned at emergency power, pushing the massive vessel toward the system's edge in a last desperate bid for escape. 3 human destroyers peeled off from the main formation and went after it like wolves chasing a wounded elk. They didn't even need to use their main weapons. A spread of missiles did the job. The Krell ship's point defense systems managed to shoot down maybe 20% of them. The rest got through, punching into the engine section and detonating deep inside the ship's core. The cruiser's reactor went critical, and the whole vessel came apart in a flash of blue-white light. Commander Vratha's flagship was the last one still fighting. The massive ship had taken dozens of hits, but was still operational, its Krell crew refusing to surrender. The ship's weapons kept firing even as hull plates peeled away and internal decks depressurized. Thomas watched it on his main screen, feeling nothing in particular. No anger, no satisfaction, no regret. This was just a job that needed doing. Open a channel to that flagship, he ordered. His communications officer nodded. Channel open, sir. The view screen flickered and changed. Instead of showing the battle, it now displayed the interior of the Krell command bridge. The place was a disaster. Sparks rained from damaged consoles. Bodies lay motionless on the deck. And in the command throne sat Commander Vrath, his reptilian face covered in blood, his eyes wide with shock and fear. Then the image changed again as someone else stepped into frame. Admiral Catherine Mills appeared on screen, her steel-gray hair pulled back tight, her uniform crisp and clean despite the battle raging around her. Her blue eyes were cold as winter ice. "I'm Admiral Catherine Mills of the Soul Defense Fleet," she said, her voice carrying no emotion whatsoever. "You violated human territory. You ignored our warning. You came here intending to attack our home." Vratha's mouth opened. He tried to say something, maybe to beg for mercy or negotiate a surrender. The Admiral didn't let him speak. "There will be no survivors," she continued, each word precise and clear. No witnesses. No prisoners. You want to know what humans are capable of when you threaten our home? Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Something cold and final. Now you know, and now you die. The transmission ended. The screen went black. 3 seconds later, every human ship in range fired on the Krell flagship simultaneously. The combined firepower of 20 warships hit the cruiser in the same instant. Armor plating vaporized. Internal bulkheads collapsed. The reactor containment failed. The explosion lit up the entire system for a brief, brilliant moment. Then there was nothing left but cooling debris and the endless silence of space. Thomas watched the last enemy contact disappear from his tactical display. The entire engagement had lasted less than 8 minutes from start to finish. All enemy vessels destroyed, Captain, Rodriguez reported. No survivors detected. Hunter packs are securing the debris field now. Acknowledged, Thomas replied. Have the platforms returned to standby mode. Recall all ships to defensive positions. And get me a full after-action report within the hour. Around him, the bridge crew went back to work as if they just finished a training exercise rather than wiping out an entire invasion fleet. Because, in a way, that's exactly what it had been. Just another drill. Just another group of outsiders who thought humans would be easy prey. They always learned the truth eventually, usually right before they died. 6 weeks after battle, something appeared in orbit around the Krell homeworld. No warning, no advance notice. One moment the orbital space was empty, and the next moment there was a small metallic sphere hanging there, perfectly still, broadcasting a signal on every known frequency. The Imperial Palace went into immediate lockdown. Defense satellites powered up their weapons, targeting the mysterious object. Fighter squadrons scrambled from surface bases, ready to intercept. But the sphere just floated there, transmitting the same message over and over in flawless Krell language. Attention, Krell Empire. You are receiving a message from humanity. This concerns your missing war fleet. All Imperial Council members must view this immediately. Within an hour, the Grand Chamber was filled. Every high-ranking member of the Krell government crowded into the ancient hall, their scales rustling with nervous energy. They'd heard nothing from Commander Vratha's fleet since it had departed for human space 6 weeks ago. Complete radio silence. Every attempt to contact them had failed. Some council members had convinced themselves the fleet was simply maintaining communication blackout for tactical reasons. Others feared the worst, but didn't dare say it out loud. The Krell Empire had never lost an entire fleet before, not in 500 years of expansion and conquest. Emperor Draxon himself sat on the central throne, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. He was old now, his scales faded and scarred from a lifetime of warfare. He led the Krell through 30 successful campaigns, conquered 18 species, and expanded the Empire to control 40 star systems. But today, looking at that innocent-looking probe on the display screens, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. Play the transmission, he ordered, his deep voice echoing through the silent chamber. The lights dimmed. Every screen in the chamber lit up with the same image. For a moment, there was just darkness and stars. Then the camera angle shifted, and everyone saw it. Wreckage. Vast fields of twisted metal and shattered hull plates drifting through space. The distinctive green and gold armor plating of Krell warships torn into fragments. Pieces of ships that had once been symbols of imperial might, now reduced to cosmic debris. A council member made a choking sound. Another began to hyperventilate. They all recognized those ships. The Vengeance of Krell, the Triumphant Dawn, the Emperor's Wrath. 12 of the most powerful vessels in the Imperial fleet, now nothing but scrap metal floating in the void. The video continued, showing different angles of destruction. Long-range shots that revealed the true scale of the devastation. Close-ups of hull sections with holes punched clean through them, the edges still glowing from the heat of impact. A command bridge, completely exposed to space, bodies still strapped into their stations. Then the perspective changed. The camera pulled back to show a human warship, one of their sleek black vessels, hanging motionless among the wreckage like a shark swimming through a graveyard. And standing on the bridge of that ship, visible through the forward viewport, was a human woman in a dark uniform. The camera zoomed in on her face as she began to speak. "My name is Admiral Catherine Mills of Soul Defense Fleet," she said, her voice calm and precise. "This message is directed to the Krell Empire and to any other species that might be watching this recording." She gestured to the viewport behind her, where the debris field was clearly visible. 6 weeks ago, your empire sent 12 warships into human-controlled space. They were given a clear warning. An automated message, broadcast on all frequencies, told them they were trespassing, told them to turn back, told them what would happen if they continued. The Admiral's expression didn't change. No anger, no satisfaction, just cold, professional detachment. They ignored that warning. They proceeded deeper into our territory with weapons charged and invasion protocols active. They came to our home intending to conquer it. The video cut to combat footage. Weapons platforms powering up, rail guns firing, Krell cruisers exploding one after another in brilliant flashes of light. The systematic, brutal destruction of an entire fleet. It was all there, recorded in perfect clarity. Several council members looked away. One vomited on the floor. Emperor Draxon sat frozen, watching his proud warriors die over and over on the screens. The footage ended, returning to Admiral Mills on her bridge. "Human territory is clearly marked on all standard navigation charts," she continued. "Our borders are well-defined. Our warnings are genuine, and our patience for trespassers has run out completely." She walked closer to the camera, her blue eyes seeming to look directly at everyone watching. 12 ships entered our space uninvited. 12,000 Krell warriors ignored our warning and continued their approach. The result is what you see behind me. 0 survivors, 0 prisoners, total annihilation. The Admiral paused, letting that sink in. This is not a threat. This is not posturing or bluffing. This is a simple statement of fact. Anyone who enters human territory without authorization will be destroyed, not captured, not turned away. Destroyed, completely and utterly, with no exceptions. The video shifted again, displaying a star chart. Human space was marked in red, with precise coordinates defining every boundary. And floating at the edge of that boundary, clearly visible on the map, was a debris field of the Krell fleet. "We have marked our borders with the wreckage of those who ignored them," Admiral Mills said. "Consider it a permanent monument, a reminder of what happens when you test humanity's resolve." Her expression hardened. "Stay out of our space. We will not warn you again. The next fleet that crosses our borders will meet the same fate, and the one after that, and every single one after that, for as long as it takes for the galaxy to understand that we mean what we say." The screen went black. The transmission ended. The chamber sat in absolute silence. Emperor Draxon stared at the empty screen for a long moment. His claws gripped the armrest of his throne so tightly that the metal groaned under the pressure. Around him, council members waited, afraid to speak, afraid to even breathe too loudly. Finally, the Emperor spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "How many ships do we have within 10 light years of human space?" His military advisor, a scarred veteran named Korsh, checked his data tablet with shaking hands. 17, my Emperor. Patrol vessels, mostly. A few scout ships. Recall them immediately. All of them. I want every Krell vessel at least 20 light years from human borders within 48 hours. Yes, my Emperor. And what about... Update every navigation chart in the Empire, Draxon continued, his voice getting stronger. Mark human territory as Forbidden Zone. No Krell ship is to approach those coordinates for any reason. Any captain who violates this order will be executed for treason before they can cross the boundary. A young officer near the back of the chamber, barely into his first decade of service, spoke up with the courage of inexperience. My Emperor, surely we cannot simply accept this insult. 12 ships, 12,000 warriors. Should we not prepare our main battle fleet? Strike back at these humans? Show them the true might of the Krell Empire. The chamber fell silent again. Every eye turned to the young officer, then to the Emperor. For a moment, Draxon just stared at the fool who had spoken. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was a hollow, bitter sound that sent chills through everyone present. "Strike back," the Emperor repeated. "You think we should attack them?" He gestured at the screen where the video had played. "Did you not see what happened? 12 of our finest warships, crewed by our best warriors, equipped with our most advanced weapons. They lasted 8 minutes. 8 minutes from first contact to total annihilation." The Emperor stood up from his throne, his massive form towering over the chamber. "Those humans didn't just destroy a fleet, you fool. They sent us a message. They showed us exactly what they're capable of. And more importantly, they showed us what we are not." He pointed at the screen. "We are not the predators in that corner of space. They are, and predators do not attack apex predators unless they have absolutely no choice." The Krell weren't the only ones who received the probe. Humanity made sure of that. Within days of the first transmission, identical probes appeared across the galaxy. They materialized in orbit around major trade stations where hundreds of species conducted business. They showed up at busy wormhole junctions where ships from dozens of civilizations passed through daily. They appeared above capital worlds of every significant government in known space. Each probe carried the same message, the same video, the same cold warning from Admiral Catherine Mills. And each probe was programmed to broadcast continuously on every known frequency, making it impossible to ignore. The effect rippled through the galactic community like a shockwave. At the Terminus Trade Station, one of the largest commercial hubs in the sector, business ground to a complete halt. Merchants from 100 different species stood in the main concourse, staring up at the massive display screens as a human message played over and over. Ship captains who'd been planning routes suddenly started pulling up star charts, checking distances from human space, calculating new paths that would keep them far away from those red-marked borders. A trading consortium that had been planning to establish new routes through the outer edges of human territory canceled their entire expansion within hours. The financial loss was massive, but as their chairman pointed out, losing money was better than losing ships. The Vaix Syndicate, a notorious pirate organization that had been raiding human colony vessels for the past 50 years, held an emergency meeting. Their leadership watched the probe's message 3 times in complete silence. Then their commander gave a simple order that no one questioned. Stay at least 30 light years from anything human. Any crew member who violated that order would be spaced immediately. Within a week, pirate attacks on human vessels dropped to 0. The raiders who'd once seen isolated human ships as easy targets now avoided them like they carried a plague. But the biggest response came from the Galactic Coalition itself. The Coalition was the closest thing the galaxy had to a unified government. 43 member species, representing thousands of worlds, all bound together by treaties and mutual defense pacts. They were the most powerful political entity in known space, and they'd been around for over 3,000 years. 2 centuries ago, when humanity had first made contact with the wider galaxy, the Coalition had been the ones to decide humanity's fate. After reviewing human history, human culture, and especially human military capabilities, they'd made their judgment. Too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be trusted as members of civilized galactic society. They'd offer humanity a choice. Submit to Coalition oversight, allow monitoring stations in their system, agree to strict limitations on their military development, or accept complete isolation from the rest of the galaxy. Humanity had chosen isolation. The Coalition had been fine with that. Let the violent primitives stay in their corner of space, killing each other as they'd done for thousands of years. Eventually, they'd wipe themselves out or grow up. Either way, it wasn't the Coalition's problem. For 200 years, the Coalition had maintained that position. They'd refused to recognize human sovereignty, refused to establish diplomatic relations, refused to even acknowledge humanity's right to control their own star system. That changed overnight. 3 days after the probes appeared, the Coalition's Grand Council received an official communication from the human government. It was brief, formal, and completely unprecedented. The message contained updated star charts showing exact coordinates of human territorial claims, a list of restricted zones around human space, and formal notice that any unauthorized vessel entering those zones would be destroyed without warning. The message didn't ask for recognition, didn't request permission, simply stated facts and expected compliance. The Grand Council debated for 6 hours. Some delegates argued that accepting human territorial claims would set a dangerous precedent. Others pointed out that the Krell fleet debris was still floating at the edge of human space as a very clear counterargument. In the end, the vote wasn't even close. The coalition officially recognized human sovereignty over their claimed territory. They established a mandatory 30-light-year buffer zone that all coalition vessels were required to respect. They sent a formal diplomatic message acknowledging these terms. The human response arrived within an hour. Just 2 words: acknowledged, agreed. No thank you. No attempt to open further dialogue. Just confirmation that humanity had received the message and would expect compliance. At the Coalition Assembly Station, Ambassador Vex of the Vosk Hegemony stood before the gathered delegates to address what everyone was thinking but few wanted to say out loud. Vex was old, even by Vosk standards. His scaled skin had faded to pale gray, and his voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen empires rise and fall. "Distinguished delegates," he began, his voice amplified through the massive chamber. "We need to talk about what just happened, about what we've learned, about what we should have known 200 years ago." The hall fell silent. Thousands of delegates from dozens of species turned their attention to the speaker's platform. "For 2 centuries, we called them barbaric," Vex continued. "We looked at their history and saw endless wars, saw them fighting among themselves even as they reached for the stars. We called them primitive, uncivilized, too dangerous to join galactic society." He pulled up the now infamous video on the chamber's main displays. The Krell fleet, the destruction, the cold warning. We were wrong, not about their capacity for violence. That part was accurate, but we were wrong about what it meant. Vex zoomed in on the human warships in the footage. Their black holes and bristling weapons. They weren't barbaric. They were preparing. While we spent 200 years debating trade regulations and border disputes, while we argued about ethics committees and proportional response doctrines, humanity was doing something completely different. The image changed to show the defensive platforms, the automated weapon systems, the layers upon layers protection surrounding human space. They turned their entire star system into a fortress, built weapons we'd banned centuries ago because we deemed them too cruel, developed technologies we'd never considered because we were too busy being civilized. Vex's voice grew harder. "And now we have our answer to the question we asked 200 years ago. Are humans too dangerous to join galactic society? Yes, absolutely yes. But not because they're primitive, because they're too damn effective at warfare." He gestured at the debris field visible in the footage. The Krell Empire sent 12 warships, 12,000 warriors, some of the finest military vessels in this part of the galaxy. They lasted 8 minutes. The humans didn't just win. They achieved total annihilation without taking a single casualty. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Everyone had seen the video, but hearing it stated so bluntly made it real in a different way. "We need to make a decision as a coalition," Vex said. "The Krell tested humanity and learned a hard lesson. Do we want to learn that same lesson, or do we accept reality?" He pulled up a new star chart, showing human territory marked in red with a mandatory buffer zone around it. "I propose we do more than just recognize their borders. I propose we make it absolutely clear to every species, every government, every independent captain in coalition space. Human territory is forbidden, not restricted, not discouraged. Forbidden." A delegate from the Threxian Combined stood up, her translator rendering her chittering speech into common language. "Are we to simply accept this? Allow them to dictate terms? Show weakness?" Vex's laugh was bitter. "Weakness? The weakness was ours when we abandoned their colony ships to pirates and told them it wasn't our problem. When we called them barbaric and isolated them. We created this situation. We told them they couldn't rely on anyone but themselves. So they didn't." He pointed at the video still playing on the displays. "This is what self-reliance looks like when taken to its logical extreme. They don't need us. They don't want us. And they've made it very clear what happens to anyone who bothers them anyway." The vote took place an hour later. The measure passed with near unanimity. Human territory would be recognized, respected, and strictly avoided. Any coalition vessel found within the buffer zone without explicit human authorization, would face severe penalties, up to and including execution of the captain and seizure of the vessel. Far away, in the command center of the Seoul Defense Fleet headquarters, Captain Thomas Blake watched the coalition's proceedings on a monitor. He stood next to Admiral Mills, both of them observing the debate with professional interest. "Looks like the message was received," Thomas said quietly. Admiral Mills nodded, her expression unchanged. "Good. Maybe now they'll actually leave us alone. And if they don't..." Mills turned to look at the massive tactical display dominating one wall of the command center. It showed Earth's defensive network in real time. Thousands of weapons platforms, each one armed and ready. Patrol routes of hunter packs. Sensor grids that could detect a ship entering the system before it even knew where it was. Every possible approach covered, every weakness accounted for, every contingency planned. "Then we send another message," she said, calmly. "However many it takes until they understand. We gave them 200 years of peace. 200 years of isolation while we built all of this. They chose to leave us alone back then. That was their smartest decision." She looked back at the monitor showing the coalition debate. "If they decide to test us again, we'll remind them why isolation was the better option for everyone involved." 20 years had passed since the Krell fleet vanished into human space and never came back. 2 decades since Admiral Catherine Mills had sent that cold message to the galaxy. 2 decades of absolute silence from the borders of human territory. The story had transformed from current events into legend. Across the galaxy, different species told a tale in different ways. The Krell themselves spoke of it in hushed whispers, a cautionary tale about arrogance and underestimating your enemy. Children were taught about it in schools, shown images of the debris field that still floated at the edge of human space as a permanent monument to folly. Other species had their own versions. Some painted humans as monsters, ruthless killers who showed no mercy. Others saw them as defenders who'd simply drawn a line and enforced it. But everyone agreed on one fundamental truth. You didn't cross into human territory. Not ever. Not for any reason. The probe that had appeared over the Krell homeworld was still there, still broadcasting its message on a loop. The Krell government had tried to destroy it several times in the early years, but every weapon they fired at it simply bounced off an energy shield they couldn't penetrate. Eventually they'd given up. Now it just hung there in orbit, a constant reminder that they could see from the surface every single night. Trading ships gave human space a wide berth, often adding days to their routes just to avoid getting anywhere close to borders. Pirates had long since learned that human vessels were completely off-limits. A few dumb ones had tried their luck in the first few years after the incident. Their ships were found later, drifting and lifeless, with no signs of what had killed them. After that, even the most desperate criminals stayed away. The Galactic Coalition had expanded significantly in those 20 years, adding new member species and new territories. But the maps always showed the same thing, a large red zone marked as human space, surrounded by an even larger buffer zone that no Coalition vessel was permitted to enter. It had become such an accepted part of galactic geography that newer species didn't even question it. That's just where the humans live, and you don't go there. On Earth, in the Seoul Defense Command Training Facility, a new generation of officers sat in a briefing room listening to their instructor. Colonel Amy Rodriguez had been a junior tactical officer 20 years ago, watching the Krell fleet get torn apart from her station aboard the Retribution. Now she was in charge of training the people who would maintain Earth's defenses for the next generation. The classroom held about 30 young officers, fresh from the academy, eager and nervous in equal measure. They'd grown up hearing stories about the Krell incident, but none of them had been alive when it happened. To them, it was history, ancient history. Rodriguez pulled up the familiar footage on the main display. The Krell fleet entering the system. The automated warning they ignored. The systematic destruction that followed. Even after 20 years, the video still had the power to make a room fall silent. When it finished, a young lieutenant near the front raised his hand. His name was David Chun, barely 23 years old, top of his class in tactical studies. "Colonel, I have a question about the response protocol," he said. "The Krell were given one warning, which they ignored. But couldn't we have fired a warning shot?" Destroyed just one ship to show we were serious? Why go straight to total annihilation? Rodriguez had been expecting this question. She got it every single class. Young officers, trained in modern military academies with modern military ethics, always struggle with the harshness of what had happened. Good question, Lieutenant, she said, walking to the front of the room. Let me answer it with some context. What did the warning say? Does anyone remember the exact wording? Another officer, a woman named Lisa Park, spoke up. It said, "You have entered human-controlled space. Turn back immediately. This is your only warning. Trespassers will be eliminated." Exactly, Rodriguez nodded. This is your only warning. Not your first warning. Your only warning. We told them exactly what would happen if they continued. They chose not to believe us. She pulled up a different image, showing the Krell fleet's tactical formation as they'd approached deeper into the system. Look at this. Their weapons were charged. Their shields were up. Their troop transports were loaded with invasion forces. These weren't explorers who wandered into the wrong neighborhood. These were conquerors who came to take our home by force. David persisted. But surely destroying one ship as a demonstration would have been enough to make them retreat. We could have saved thousands of lives. Rodriguez shook her head slowly. You're thinking like someone who grew up in a galaxy that respects boundaries. Let me tell you how the galaxy actually works out there. She brought up a galactic map, showing the territories of dozens of different species. Out there, most species play by a set of understood rules. Diplomacy, negotiation, proportional response. If someone violates your border, you file a complaint. Maybe you destroy one of their ships. They apologize, pay reparations. Everyone moves on. It's all very civilized. Her expression hardened. That system works because everyone agrees to play by those rules. But what happens when you're not part of that system? When you've been isolated for 200 years? When everyone out there thinks you're weak, primitive, easy prey? She zoomed in on human territory. If we destroyed one ship, the Krell would have retreated. Absolutely. But they would have gone back to their empire, reported that human defenses were stronger than expected, and returned with a bigger fleet. And when we destroyed some of that fleet, they'd have gone back and come again with an even bigger force. Rodriguez pulled up historical data, showing the Krell Empire's expansion pattern. That's how they operated. That's how they conquered 18 other species, probed the defenses, learned the capabilities, returned with overwhelming force. They were persistent, patient. They would have kept coming until either they won, or we destroyed their entire empire. She looked at the young officers. So we had a choice. We could play the game their way, fight battle after battle, lose ships and personnel in a grinding war of attrition, or we could send a message so clear, so brutal, so overwhelming that no one would ever want to test us again. The room was completely silent now. Everyone was listening intently. We chose the second option. We didn't just destroy a fleet. We made an example. We showed the entire galaxy exactly what happens when you threaten our home. And you know what? It worked. She pulled up current data showing ship traffic patterns around human space. 20 years. Not a single unauthorized vessel has entered our territory. Not one. The pirates who use the radar colony ships are gone. The Krell Empire, which had been expanding for centuries, stopped dead in its tracks. The Galactic Coalition, which had refused to recognize our sovereignty for 200 years, now enforces a mandatory buffer zone around our borders. Rodriguez walked along the front row of desks. We saved millions of lives by taking 12,000. We prevented countless wars by fighting one brutal battle. The cost was high, but the alternative would have cost far more. Another officer raised her hand. But, Colonel, doesn't that make us exactly what the galaxy feared? Violent, ruthless, barbaric? Maybe, Rodriguez admitted. But here's what you need to understand. Out there, they have the luxury of playing by civilized rules because they have allies, trade partners, mutual defense pacts. They can afford to be proportional because they're part of a community. She pointed at Earth on the map. We don't have that luxury. We have no allies, no one coming to help if we get attacked. It's just us, our people, our families, our children. Everything we care about is concentrated in one star system, and if we lose it, we lose everything. Her voice became intense. So yes, we're harsh. We're uncompromising. We don't give second chances to people who threaten our home because we can't afford to. The galaxy might think we're monsters, but our children sleep safely at night. Our colonies thrive without fear. Our ships travel without being harassed. She closed the tactical display. The Krell thought they could conquer us because we were isolated and alone. They learned that being alone doesn't mean being weak. It means having nothing to lose and everything to protect. Rodriguez looked each young officer in the eye. That's the lesson the galaxy learned 20 years ago. That's the lesson you're here to maintain. We don't want war. We don't want to expand. We don't want to conquer anyone. We just want to be left alone. And we've made it absolutely clear what happens to anyone who won't respect that. Outside the training facility, far above Earth's atmosphere, the defense network continued its eternal vigil. Thousands of weapons platforms orbited in precise patterns, their sensors constantly scanning, their targeting systems always ready. Hunter fleet patrols moved through the outer system in formations that had been perfected over 2 decades of practice. In deep space, at the very edge of human territory, the debris field from the Krell fleet still floated. Some pieces had drifted slightly over the years, but the main concentration remained visible on long-range scans. Passing ships could see it from light years away, a permanent warning marker at the boundary. And every day, the automated message continued to broadcast. You have entered human-controlled space. Turn back immediately. This is your only warning. No one ignored it anymore. The galaxy had learned its lesson, written in twisted metal and cold vacuum. The message was simple and absolute. Uninvited in human territory, that's a one-way journey to extinction. And after 20 years, everyone believed it.